Kansas City to New York City, from planet Earth to extraterrestrial life in space, a podcast with no equal, engaged in unconventional warfare through your speakers and headphones. This is a show about embracing the suck, conquering your demons, and finding God in the face of adversity. Chris Tonto Peranto.
Switch is on. Motherfucker, I'm gonna shoot you in the face.
Ian Scotto.
You know, Ian and I have been dating for a long time.
You are now tuned into the Battleline Podcast.
The Switch is on, Battleline Podcast. We did a best of Q1 a while back, and we had a lot of great shows during the second quarter of the year. This year is flying by. We're obviously well into quarter three. It feels like it was just a couple months ago I was in LA celebrating New Year's Eve, but yeah, guys, we're into August now, and I wanted to recap some of those favorite shows and some of those favorite moments from those shows from April, May, June. If you missed them, or if you want to relive some of them, if you enjoyed that last episode, I got to tell you guys something. I did too. Really enjoyed having Christopher Brewer on, but I was kicking myself and feeling like an absolute idiot after I posted the episode. Some of you may even know why, but I'm going to explain. I realized I did like a double take on the thumbnail. And I go, wait, the book is called Old Scroll Ranger, and the whole time I called it Old School Ranger. And I think it's almost like those old tests that you see, that you guys have probably seen, like brain teaser type of thing, where the word will say yellow, but it's written in blue, and your brain automatically goes to blue. And so for me, I feel like I see the word old, and then a word that starts with a SC and ends in L, and there's an O in there, and my mind immediately goes to old school, but old scroll. And I think scroll is not a word regularly used in my vocabulary, not being an Army Ranger, but I do not know how not once, because I said that title multiple times, did Chris Brewer correct me, or did Chris Peranto jump in and say, dude, the book is called Old Scroll Ranger. I mean, like, I don't mind being corrected, but yeah, I felt like an idiot, but I changed the description, but I still called the episode Old School Ranger because I actually did think that was appropriate for a title. And it did pretty well on our audio platforms because he is an old school ranger. But the book is Old Scroll Ranger, if you want to pick it up. Anyway, before we get into this episode, did you know up to 75% of Americans are chronically dehydrated? Drinks like coffee and alcohol dehydrate you. They're not helping. Heck, just being thirsty is a sign that you're already dehydrated. It goes deeper than just drinking more water. You need electrolytes. Think of this. Anytime you fly in a plane in a dry, pressurized cabin, you're losing fluids. Going on a 5K run or a good HIIT workout, HIIT, high-intensity interval training, where you're going to break a sweat, hydrate up with electrolytes. And you need the correct ratio of electrolytes, ideally following the ORS, or Oral Rehydration Solution Standard. That's the right mix of sodium and potassium to drive those electrolytes rapidly into the bloodstream with carbs. And ingredient integrity is key. Do you know where your electrolytes are sourced? Knowing where your ingredients are sourced is key. That's why Bubs sources all of their electrolytes from right here in the USA. That's right, sodium, chloride, potassium, magnesium, and cane sugar for all carbs, all sourced locally in the USA. Lastly, look for third-party testing to ensure the product is free from all contaminants or dodgy ingredients and label claims. Bubs uses NSF for sports certification on all of their electrolytes. This ensures that they get nothing but the cleanest ingredients as validated at the highest level. You need electrolytes, but not just any electrolytes. Try the best. Try Bubs, Hydrate or Die. I love this stuff. Love the lemon flavor. Love the berry flavor. BubsNaturals.com, promo code Battleline for 20% off your first order. BubsNaturals.com, promo code Battleline. All of that is in the description. Now, you may remember we had an episode with Jeremy Mitchell, who works very closely with Chris in Battleline Tactical. But long before all that, if we turn back the time, he was a guard at Guantanamo Bay. And he gives us an inside look into what it was really like working at Gitmo, and it's pretty crazy. So let's get into that.
Well, the majority of the training leading up to Guantanamo Bay was like, it's like you said, it's like conveyor belt training. You know, it's just, let's get them the very basics, get them through there. And this is before they started like pulling people from those that's been serving in that area for a while and saying, hey, tell them what it's like, been there for the last year and a half or whatever. But anyways, so we were getting the very basics of not only what was 95 Echo, 31 Echo, which is still military police, but it's the cage kickers, as we call them, the guys that work in prison. So we were kind of learning that aspect. And it was literally like, make sure you count all the spoons when you get them back and stuff like that. For the psychological stuff, it really, it was just, they were trying to train us how to not get mad when somebody throws, face or come in your face or whatever, and I got hit by multiple things like that throughout that experience in Guantanamo. They basically were training us like, so someone throws a cup of shit in your face, right? You can't get mad. You have to just look at them. You have to walk off the block. You have to go take your uniform off, because we always brought an extra uniform on the block with us.
Just in case you got shit or come on you. Exactly. That's awesome.
So we throw the new uniform on, and of course we have mouthwash. We'd rinse our hair. We'd scrub up this little water hose and wash off real quick. And then we'd have to go right back down the block, look at the person that did it and says, how can I help you? What's wrong? Why are you upset?
Is that right? I know what I'm going to ask Ian this. Do you think that's right? I mean, I want your opinion. I think that's a bunch of horse shit, dude. But why, Ian, do you think that as a civilian?
I feel like I don't know enough, because is it meant to kind of, I don't know, psychological thing? Because I was thinking about what's his name, General Mattis, where General Mattis was always very against waterboarding. And the reason he said he was against it is he said, I can get a lot more accomplished with a pack of cigarettes and just like give a guy a cigarette and we could communicate, and he's probably going to give up a little bit more information with me, like getting down to his level. So I don't know if that's the thinking. I don't know, because I am a civilian and I haven't experienced it, where like the anger, I would assume like getting in the guy's face, it might not lead to getting any information that you're trying to interrogate these guys for.
Well, I'll tell you this much, that when that happened, that was during Abu Ghraib is when I was down there. So when that started coming out and everything. So there was also in Guantanamo, everybody kept talking about you're waterboarding, you're torturing them. And
we'd hear that all. You hear that all the time, and it was bullshit.
None of that was going on. We were watching the news and hearing people tell us what we were doing, and we're like, y'all don't understand. If we forget to give them the right servings, we get in trouble for, if we don't give them enough serving on their food and everything. When they're in Guantanamo, that's where what you were talking about, Ian, where they're trying to sit them down in a room and have that pack of cigarettes with them and eat that meal with them. And, there are some things they did to soften them up before that, but it was never waterboarding or anything. It was just other psychological things. And
well, it's funny, when we had Ed Slodope on the podcast the first time, it's well known because it came out, they blasted certain music, including dope. And that's why I asked Ed Slodope about it. And he was like, yeah, I love the fact that we were playing at Gitmo.
It's a great song, too. I have it in my workout list. I just listened to it at the gym.
I cannot listen to Delta Dawn without getting the heebie-jeebies, I'm telling you, because they would play Delta Dawn, Metallica, and it just whatever song they had with Metallica.
I think the whole list you could find online, the whole like Gitmo playlist.
Oh yeah, and it was all three at the same time and everything. But this was for people who don't understand what was happening and everything, and I didn't understand at the time. Now I do. After several years of training and stuff like that, but at the time I didn't know. But what they were doing, soften them up, was they had to keep them awake. So if you bring them into a room to prepare them for questioning. And a civilian here in the United States, and civilian side, you put somebody in a room, leave them in there for an hour because you want them to be stuck in their own thoughts. And if they fall asleep, that tells you something. So that's a whole different thing.
What does
But
that
in
tell
Guan,
you? Tell me what that, no, come on, tell me. What
well,
does that
so
mean if they
like
fall?
if you put somebody in a room and they start getting really comfortable and going to sleep and everything, most people are like, oh, it's because he realizes he's, not guilty. He's like, no, he realizes he's guilty. He's got caught. He's just relaxing because he knows he's about to be in a jail cell and he's going to be in there for hours with people screaming and yelling, not going to get much sleep and everything. So that's what that means. You put somebody that you suspect of a crime or something like that in a room for a couple hours and you kind of watch their body language, everything. If they start relaxing, getting some sleep, putting their head down and everything, you can be like, yeah, that's pretty much telling me I'm on the
Oh,
right track. I got the right person,
Well,
okay.
isn't it like also just the psychological, torture, for lack of a better word, of putting them through that? Because, like, for example, I read the book, A Place Called Waco by David Thibodeau. And for those who don't know, David was one of the members of the Waco group,
Koresh,
Right.
yeah.
David Koresh
Yeah,
guy?
he
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
actually, it's weird. He was the drummer for Koresh's band because,
Oh, I saw
Koresh
the
originally had a
documentary.
band.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so when the ATF was trying to get them to evacuate the home, they were just blasting music all
Yeah.
throughout the night, hoping, all right, we're gonna really get these people annoyed to the point where they're gonna say, I need to leave here. This is too much.
Yeah. And it all depends on your definition of torture. But yes, it's all
Sure, exactly.
psychological uh games basically. But
Does it work? Does music? I've never seen that we're blasting music. Actually, I think it has, like you were saying, you were getting tired of it. It has a detrimental effect on the actual guards. It affects them just as much as it
yeah,
affects the detainees. Because I don't want to hear the same damn. I don't want to sit here in my car and listen to the same music over and over
exactly.
for an hour.
Yeah.
So
It does because it's all about sleep too. So you're trying to keep the person
sleep
awake. And that's
deprivation,
what I
sure.
was in Guantanamo. It's not only about annoying in their sense of hearing and stuff like that. It was also about keeping them awake, because if you put them in that room and they're sitting in that chair and they're waiting for a while, they're going to try to go to sleep. And your whole thing was keep them awake because the longer you can keep somebody awake, the more susceptible they're going to be to wanting to talk to you because they're wanting to open up. So for an example, so you put somebody in there, you got that music going for a few hours, um you're stressing them out, you're stressing their mind out, you're keeping them up, all this other stuff, right? You have the interrogator that would come in and he'll start sitting there like, I'm going to ask you some questions. Now, this isn't how it happened every time. This is just different. There's
Sure.
different ways to go after different people, and I didn't know that at the time, but they did a full evaluation on this person. So this is how we're going to go after this person, right? Anyways, so you keep him up and everything. He goes in there and starts questioning. I want to know about this. I want to know about that. And most of the questions they're asking, they already know the answers to, right? So and all of a sudden here comes this attractive woman and a guy in a nice suit comes in the room and they just start cussing everybody. They're cussing me out as the guard. They're cussing out the interrogator.
And this is a
This is not
plan.
how,
This is a
yeah,
scripted. A
this is
script.
all
Gotcha. Gotcha.
scripted plan. This
Gotcha.
is all scripted plan. This is not how we treat people. Da 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 da. And so now those two people become his rescuer.
Just a good cop, bad cop.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
So, and that's what it is. You have to break down the mind because let's face it. I know, you as a ranger, Chris, you have many nights where you're out there tired. I think you told a story about,
Yeah.
you were carrying your weapon on your back and you're just so tired. And at some point you were just, I didn't even realize I was still walking,
Well, you
just
zombie.
keep
I mean,
going.
everybody does. Sleep deprivation is
Yep.
it's sleep deprivation is it's not it just sees how to us it's how far you can go. What can you do? How
Yeah.
far you can push yourself. It's not a torture. But
Yeah.
and when you say susceptible, it's not you're not more susceptible. You just your brain isn't as fast as it usually is. So when somebody's
Right.
asking you a question, it's harder to think up of a lie
Oh, yeah.
and be truthful and be as convincing on that lie because you're just so tired.
Right.
But
Yeah.
I get that, and I don't think I heard stories. I remember reading. I was in Iraq at that time, and I read a story. It was from I don't know which news organization calling that torture, and I was like,
Yeah.
"Oh shit!" All these Rangers at Ranger Corps are being tortured right now, guy. I mean, that's
Yeah.
it's like sleep deprivation, my ass.
Even
But that,
even your newly entry soldiers in basic training going without sleep. It's like
but
this
shit,
is
yeah,
not torture. It
it's
sucks,
not
but it's not
torture.
torture. Yeah.
First night, man, at
Yeah.
30th AG of Benning. Well, when you were there, so I guess I want to get back to we skipped it with throwing shit in fecal matter
Right. Right.
throwing shit literally and cum and whatever spit in your face. Were
Yeah.
they trying to elicit a response? Because that was my next question. You answered it. Was it during Abu Ghraib, which you said it was?
Right. Yeah.
Um, Were they trying to elicit a response to get you to do something physical because they knew if you did that some media outlet, some whistleblower is going to find out, and
Yeah.
all of a sudden you're getting, everybody's getting beat, they're getting electrodes to their testicles, or
Yeah.
was that what they were trying to do? Was to get you to get to physically put a mark on them, to physically hurt
Oh
them?
yeah, yeah. That was actually part of it because the Red Cross was there constantly. So they
I was,
would
yeah,
pull
geez.
they'd pull random people and they'd schedule people to talk to and everything. But it was that, and it was just a game for them too, because they were just sitting here like, I'm bored, so let me do this, but also trying to get you into the cell also. Um Not only for you to beat them, but hey, how can I do something to him? Because there was plenty of military or guards and everything that had their wrists or fingers broken because when they'd reach through the food tray to give them their food, the detainee would grab their wrist and then pull it down on the thing and break
Yeah.
it and break their wrist. So it was like a game, and they were. I think there was one time when we were doing intel collection in the cells where you search the cells, look for anything. We found a piece of paper and somebody was actually tracking scores on that block of who did what to what MP. We had our because this is when we were wearing BDUs, right? So we had our name tapes. We had a piece of tape over that because sometimes that would come off, and you got a real high score if you figured out, the MP's name, right? For a long time before they figured my name out, they called me Sergeant Squeaky Boot because my right boot, because you remember we used to polish the boots black, and
Yeah.
if you didn't, anyways, that leather boot would squeak every time I take a step with my right leg. And so they called me Sergeant Squeaky Boot because all I did was squeak, 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 because I'd have to walk up the block and down the block, up the block and down the block. And they got annoyed with me over that. And I was thinking about trying to fix the boot for a while. And I was like, you know what? Fuck y'all. I'm just going to let it squeak, I didn't
Well,
deal with them
I
too.
mean, that's torture. I mean, just annoyance right there.
Yeah.
The you know, did anything that you saw, and you can might skip around a little bit, but did Gitmo did we get anything that you saw from Gitmo? And you did start to do your own interrogations. You went from being security to doing some helping out with some or am I incorrect on?
Well, helping out in an unofficial manner because when we get to, because you had different jobs throughout Guantanamo. One of them is you could be working the Sally ports, or something, or work, like I said, working the block, walking up and down the block, or escort to their interrogation. And sometimes the interrogators, whatever agencies they work for. So when I say interrogators, I know different agencies call them different
Yeah.
things, but I'm just using interrogators, a generalization. But they would pull us and they'd sit there and they'd talk to you for a minute. They'd get a good feel of who you are and everything. And I mentioned one time to somebody, I mean, I just started soaking this stuff up. I loved it. Right. So they would pull you in there and say, hey, we need you to do this. So you'd go in there, you'd take your uniform off and you put on a button up shirt, some blue jeans and stuff like that. And you just sit there and kind of, either take notes or you would take part in it. And I'm learning as I go through this process. But one of the things was, you're the idiot. So like I would sit there and say, well, what about this? He's like, no, 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 we're not worried about that. Or, don't say that, so the interrogator's using me as a prop,
Right.
but, so, I mean, it sounds ridiculous, but I loved it because I learned so much being in the room. But anyways, did we get anything from him? So the best example I can give you was there was one guy there. He was there for 4.5 years and everybody told us to leave him alone. All the detainees that were on his right and left would say, don't mess with him. He's retarded. He's slow. Right. And if anybody gets upset of using the word retarded, I'm sorry, that's what the detainees were
I don't
saying.
think our audience cares.
Right.
Yeah, where you
Yeah. So they would tell us, hey, he's slow MP, leave him alone, and donkey MP, leave him alone. And the dude acted slow. I'm talking about he had like the cross-eyed look and he was just like, oh, MP, give me this. And he would slobber on himself, he'd piss himself, all this other stuff, right? So he legitimately for 4.5 years played that role really good. And then I was one of the ones that escorted him to interrogation one day. And while we were sitting there, it was me and two other MPs. He pissed himself as we were walking in the door, all this other stuff. So we set him down, we, chain him up, handcuff him and everything. The interrogator walks right past us, and this doesn't usually happen. They usually let us come out and they'll let him sit in there for a few hours. But that interrogator just pushed us aside, and he lays this stuff down in front of him, and it's just these pictures and these paperwork and stuff like that. And he says, "This is who you are. Here's this person. Here's this person in your life, and we're about to go visit them because if you don't tell us if you don't identify who you are, or this person is, I can't protect them from the rockets that's going to fall on them." And all of a sudden, he just sat up and he just started speaking perfect English, and he's like, "How can what do you want to know?" And but for 4.5 years, he sat there and acted that way.
Wow.
So
that's
they were
that's a great story.
Well, that just shows how, man, they do have some intestinal fortitude, like terrorists, and but how dedicated they are to their to whatever they're dedicated. I don't even know what they're dedicated to. Just how far they'll take it to win the fight, to win.
Yeah.
It really is.
Well, there was so many people sitting there saying, that goat farmers were getting rolled up into becoming sent to Guantanamo Bay when they weren't really terrorists and everything. I was like, look, man, y'all don't understand the logistics that goes into getting somebody into Guantanamo Bay. And I quickly learned that most all the people there were high up on somebody's food chain in some terrorist group or agency or a money person or something like that,
So it wasn't just some low level.
Yeah, there was no low level. Everybody in there was at some, I would say, they were decision makers or shot callers, wherever they were picked up at, or they had a special a trade or something, bomb maker. We had one guy that was we called him the kickboxer. Can't tell you his real name because one, I don't know it, but we called him the kickboxer. That dude was solid chisel muscle, if I've ever seen any. And that dude was deadly. He would hang because in where we were at in Camp Delta, they had like the rec yard, and it was just fenced in chain. It had this whole chain link fence across the top so nobody can climb out or anything. Well, he would climb up the side and he would hook his toes into that chain link fence, and he would just sit there and do sit-ups hanging completely off of it. I mean, that dude, whenever they told, here's a quick story for you. So they called us one day. We were actually getting ready to leave the camp, and they were like, "No, we need y'all to come back because we have to do what's called a cell extraction or an IRF, right?" And we're like, "Okay." So we go down, we get suited up, which is all that protective gear you wear that doesn't really protect you. And I was the shield man. And they said, they go through our brief. We have to have that camera in front of us. And they're saying, tell us your role, tell us this and da. They said, all right, you're going into cell 63. And that is detainee number. And they give us his number. And we all had the number memorized. I'm not going to give it out here, but we all had the number memorized for the kickboxer. And I was just like, oh God, that's the scariest I've ever been in my life. Because anytime you go into his cell, somebody's getting hurt. And I was the shield man. So I was like, whatever.
That's the first guy. You're the first one in. Okay.
Right. Yeah. First one in. So my whole job is to put that shield up and, try to pin him into the corner down to the ground, just get him off the thing. But when I say this dude was tough, I mean, there was nothing in that cell that he couldn't use to his advantage. But anyways, so they get ready to open the door, and you can hear the shield shaking because it's like hitting the edge of the wall and everything. I'm just like, oh, this is going to suck, but oh well, let's get it over with, right? And the cell door opens up, and as I round the frame of the door, I see this green Kevlar come over my head, and it's my number 2 guy. And he just wham hits the kickboxer, and the kickboxer turns sideways. So I finally get the shield against him. And I mean, it was, I forget what movie it was where everybody's just on top of each other, grabbing arms, biting legs and stuff like that. And people were trying to put I had a zip tie on my arm, like right here, whenever I came up out of the pile.
Somebody didn't know. They're just throwing zip tie.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And the kickboxer was an African-American guy. And I was just like, guys, come on. I mean, this is the whitest the white can be, but everybody was just grabbing whatever they could and putting zip ties on stuff. So, but yeah, I'm not ashamed to admit I was scared to go in that cell after that guy because he was meaty.
Do you know what affiliate? Could you say what group he was with? Was he or was
he was picked up in Afghanistan, and his whole thing was he was a trainer at one of their camps. And going back to your point about these guys aren't stupid, right? They were actually ahead of the curve for a long time on getting to know our tactics and techniques. They spent more time watching us and studying us than we did them out there in Afghanistan and Iraq and stuff
Yeah.
like that. So we were spending more time adapting to them, you know. So all these new systems came out, we thought, hey, we got this new jammer system for this IED and everything. Well, as soon as we did that, they had a new way of setting that IED off because the jamming system would jam it because they knew about it coming out, you know. But anyways,
Yeah.
so they brought this guy in from somewhere. I don't know exactly what it was, but I do know he had a British accent. So you take from that whatever you want. But
That's weird. That is
yeah,
weird.
but he had no affiliation. He didn't care about Muslim, or he wasn't Muslim. He didn't pray with them or anything like that. He didn't care anything about their politics. He was pretty much, you pay me, I'm coming to train people, you know. So, and that's all he did. And he was the one training the detainees on the block how to make weapons inside their cell out of anything we can give them. So in Gitmo, they only got like a couple of sheets of toilet paper, their orange top, orange bottom, their little toothbrush, a little tiny piece of soap, a mat to sleep on. That's it for the Camp Delta side. All that's out there in the media. That's not top secret stuff. But he would teach them how to make weapons out of all that stuff, right? He would teach them how to weaken the welds inside the cell by taking salt from your meal and water and build like little salt crystals on the weld. And he's like, guys, we're going to be here forever. So you might as well just, if you're in a cell, just go ahead and start weakening those welds and everything. And the camp commander actually found out they were doing that. So one of the processes of us doing a cell cleaning where we go in there trying to collect information is we would go brush the welds off and rinse them off and everything to get the salt off of them and everything. So they were they're smart, you know.
Yeah, man, fighting in war and
Yeah.
so many years and been in cells. You figure that even I think even our own convicts and criminals in the high maximum security places know all the tricks of the trade. Yeah. What was the coolest? If you I'd say coolest. What was the most intricate weapon? Yeah, I did because that interests me. I would watch documentaries, and I do. I watch about the big prisons and even go to some of the museums, and you see some of the weapon systems that are made out of some crazy stuff.
Yeah.
Even just hardening paper.
Yeah.
And making it. But yeah, did anybody that that you worked? Did anybody get seriously hurt while you were there? Or
Oh
your
yeah.
buddies and but yeah, I know it's morbid, but it interests me, man. I always find corrections and places like Gitmo and Abu Ghraib, and then our own big prisons here interesting, just because it's its own little world, within a world.
Oh yeah, and yeah, you're right. There was the most intricate weapon in Guantanamo was they would make this little spear gun, and they'd make I'd call it a little bolt because it reminds me of the little arrow from a crossbow because it's about that long. And my first time finding one, I thought this thing was made of wood or something, but like you said, it was made from toilet paper, elastic from the clothing, thread from the clothing, and I think some of the plastic wrapping stuff from crackers and stuff like that from the meals and everything. Which after a while we started having to like take the plastic. We couldn't give them any plastic other than spoon. We had to get the whole spoon back.
I loved that episode with Jeremy Mitchell. Definitely go back and revisit it. Next up, we have the episode I did with Andrew Goldsmith. And one of his books is Zarqari's Ice Cream. And he gives me the scoop behind that book title and the story that goes along with it.
Yeah, so if you want a combat story, so I was in a regular infantry unit. We weren't like the 82nd Airborne. We weren't a Ranger Battalion, So we were just like your regular infantry guys, ground pounders in Iraq. And so in my book, I have a lot of kind of unconventional combat stories, like basically when you're driving down the road and the IEDs hit you, or when we were hit by there were these weapons called an improvised rocket-assisted mortar, or an IRAM, and these are these crazy Iranian missiles that they taught the Iraqi militias there how to use. And in 2008, we were involved in our base was involved in the largest IRAM attack to that date. It might still be the biggest one in history, but at least to that date, it was the biggest one there, where basically just these flying refrigerators of death rained down upon us and caused all kinds of chaos. But my favorite combat story is probably, and the combat in quotes is probably the namesake of the book, Zarqari's Ice Cream. So people might not remember, but Zarqawi back in like 2004 to 2006 era was terrorist #1 in Iraq. He was a really bad dude. He was a guy probably more responsible than anyone else for really instigating the civil war between the Shia and the Sunni Muslims in Iraq. He blew up some very famous mosque, and it just kind of started cascading from there. He was a Sunni guy, and he would bring in car bombers from all. It was kind of like a pre-ISIS thing. He'd bring in car bombers in from all over the world, and they would just blow up Shia targets, soft Shia targets for the most part. Terrible guy. So anyway, like he was public enemy #1, and everyone in our sector was looking for him. And we knew he was in our sector close by. We did a couple missions kind of in the area we thought he was in. Then one day we get this big battalion mission where they start getting the whole battalion, which is rare. Like usually you're going out in like a platoon, which is like 20 or 30 people, or like maybe a company, which is like up to 100. But they called up our whole battalion, so about 500 people. They got everyone in their trucks, and we sat on the base. All like they got us ready at like 8 o'clock at night, and we just sat in our trucks all night. No one getting any sleep till like 4 in the morning. Then we headed out. So we were on outer cordon to get Zarqawi. They had a pinpoint location on them. Our units were outer cordon, and the Rangers were actually going to go in and hit the house and hopefully just pull out Zarqawi or shoot him in the face. And so what happened is we're on the outside perimeter, and the Rangers flying on helicopters, of course, all badass, and they hit the house, and we hear all the flashbangs and, you know, breaching going on, and they just go through the house and like devastate it in like 90 seconds, and they're gone. So then they call us in, and so we go through again, you know, kind of raiding the house again after the Rangers, and there's still some military-aged men who flee, and there's shots fired. It's all kinds of just stupid, dumb chaos. It's a house full of women and kids. There's about 15, 20 of them, and we pull them all out and put them up front. And it ends up being that Zarqawi was actually there, but he had left about an hour and a half, 2 hours prior. But this is basically all his women, all his hangers-on were there. And so it's just like, wow, we were so close to getting this guy. If we had got them, like even just on outer cordon, we would have like, this would have been like the biggest thing to happen in this war this year, like easy. So we miss him, but then our medic goes into his refrigerator and he pulls out these giant boxes of ice cream. And we haven't eaten since like dinner the night before, and we're just no sleep. We're all disgruntled. We're all pissed off, you know, kicking his teenage sons and stuff in the butt and just like mad. And all of a sudden the medic finds the ice cream and he hands out to all of us. And he's like, guys, cheer up. We're eating Zarqawi's ice cream right now. And I said, God damn it, that's not gonna be a great book title one day. And so that was our near miss of glory. Lo and behold, about 2 months later, Delta Force and other elements did manage to track down Zarqawi, and they dropped 2 Air Force JDAMs on him, and they killed him. That was actually 5 miles from our base. I heard those bombs drop. It was pretty cool, and that was the end of Zarqawi.
All right, guys, hope you're enjoying this episode thus far. If you've been with us since the beginning, you know that every episode is sponsored by our great friends at Fort Scott Munitions. FSM is a manufacturer of multi-federal patented solid copper and brass CNC-spun ammunition that is designed to tumble upon impact in soft tissue, leaving devastating wound channels for faster bleed out and quicker incapacitation. This ammunition was originally developed to innovate and improve on the standard of military-grade ammunition design. It was found that not only did the TUI ammunition outperform competitors in the self-defense industry, but it quickly became apparent that it would be a top contender for hunters alike. With the ammunition being CNC spun, the tolerances are some of the tightest on the market, ensuring that you receive the same results with every pull of the trigger. Fort Scott Munitions is available throughout privately owned businesses in every state, and you'll get the best deal, though, through us when you go to FSM.com and you use the exclusive promo code Battleline. You'll get 15% off most things on the store. Once again, that's FSM.com. Promo code Battleline. Link to that is in the description. Just use the promo code Battleline, one word. All right, we talked ammo. Let's talk night vision. Now you can have the superpower to see in the dark with the Viper Binocular Night Vision System by Photonis Defense, the global leader in night vision solutions, providing more high-quality night vision capabilities than anyone. Military, law enforcement, and public safety end users utilize Photonis Defense solutions to give them the edge at night in tactical situations and rescue operations. Hunters, shooters, boaters, and enthusiasts can rely on the Photonis Defense Viper binocular to become masters of darkness. The new Viper binocular system carries the same features and benefits as the Photonis Defense Viper binocular with a ruggedized body and harnesses the power of the Echo Intensifier tubes, giving you sharper images, reduced halo, and industry-leading ultra-fast auto-gating across the range of dynamic operating conditions. Visit PhotonisDefense.com for more information or look for Photonis Defense product options from your night vision dealer. Link to that as well in the description. But if you want to spell that out, it's PHOTONIS defense.com, PhotonisDefense.com. All right, we had the best-selling author Brad Taylor on the show, Delta Force veteran. And for his latest book, Into the Gray Zone, he took a trip to India because that's where the book takes place. And we get into that.
I'm saying India. Why India?
Yeah.
I mean, that's weird to me. I'm like, man, what? Really? India? And you get into their secret service type stuff.
Yeah. Well, so
yeah. What
here's
the
how
hell,
I came.
man?
Usually it's something. I'll just be reading news one day and see something and go, what the hell is that all about? And so I'll start doing some research on it. And I'm like, holy moly, there's a story there. So a year and a half ago, the Sikh separatists in India used to be their Al Qaeda. This is in the 80s. They were the ones that were doing all the killing. They blew up an aircraft in Canada, killed everybody on board. They were doing, shooting people up in India all over the place. They wanted their own country. The Khalistan, the Sikh separatists said, we want our own country. And they were their versions of Al Qaeda, to the point where Indira Gandhi did an attack on their holy site. Huge battle took place, and she ended up killing like 400 people. 2 months later or 4 months later, her bodyguards, the Sikhs are real martial guys, they're always in the military and stuff. So her bodyguards were Sikhs. They turned on her and killed her. She was assassinated. Well, that's all in the past, in the 80s and early 90s. Well, flash forward to 2023, actually maybe in 2024, and a Sikh guy in Canada, which is the largest population of Sikhs outside of India is in Canada. He got killed by a drive-by shooting, just got mugged, no big deal, nobody paying attention to it. Well, then Canada came out and said Modi and the Indian government, the RAW, their RAW is the Research and Analysis Wing, their CIA smoked this guy on Canadian soil. And I was like, what? Why would India go to Canada and kill this guy? That doesn't sound right. But I mean, I know the Canadian government wouldn't come out and say that publicly unless they had some damn good proof. Well, then 3 months later, the FBI arrests the guy in America. And the Justice Department says, hey, the Research Analysis Wing and Modi sent this guy over here to kill this Sikh. He was going to assassinate this Sikh separatist. And I was like, okay, I got to dig into that. There's a story there. And that's where it actually came. I started doing research on India because of that.
What research did you do? Do you have like book research?
Oh, yeah.
Paper research?
Hell, I got a ton of it right here.
Mm-hmm. I was going to say, man, there's got to be something back there, man.
I mean, so don't know if you can see, that's.
Oh, yeah.
I got a ton of books like that on China, on World Upside Down, Unending Game, all these books on India I read first to get a feel. Originally, I was going to go with Pakistan, and I got so sick of writing about LET and then Islamic terrorists. So I went to China route because they were always fighting China too. And so I started doing the research on that side, and that's a twist in this book is China. It's a gray zone, hybrid warfare, China, the United States, and India doing this fight inside India, not even knowing who the actual fighters are, who's doing the damage. So that once I got all the research done in my head of what I think I'm going to write, I'll actually travel to the place. If I can get boots on the ground, then I'll definitely do it. I mean, I've written some books that had Syria. I'm not going to go into Syria, but I can fake the funk from Iraq good enough to figure out what happened in Syria. And so we went over to India, and I went from Mumbai all the way down through Goa up to New Delhi, Old Delhi, down to Agra.
I'm just wondering, when you say did you travel with your family or?
No, just my wife. She's the one that I make her do all the work.
Okay.
So she plans the trip.
She's your bodyguard, dude. You got to take
That's
her,
right.
man.
She plans the trip. She buys the tickets. She schedules the whole thing. I just tell her, hey, I got to see this site in X city. Figure it out. And some of that's actually funny. I was in Turkey, in Istanbul, and I said, hey, my next thing's going to be in Romania. And actually she wasn't even with me. I said, I need a train ticket from Turkey to Romania, and I'm going to do the next part of this thing in Romania because I'd found something other. And my geography's pathetic. And she said, Romania doesn't border Turkey. I said, really? What border is it? Bulgaria is next to Turkey. Give me a ticket to Plovdiv. That's where I'm going. I'll go look at that. I did the same thing for American Trader, which is Taiwan and Australia. I said, I got to go to Taiwan and Australia. And she's like, Australia is nowhere near Taiwan, right? And it's like, I don't care. I'm going to both.
Do you get to write off all these trips as a business expense? Because I mean,
Yeah.
it is.
Oh,
Yeah.
Oh, holy
Yeah.
crap.
And down there, actually, it's a lot of work. I don't get a lot of time to mess around. So, I mean, for India, we were there for, I think 14 days. And I mean, that's everywhere we went. So Mumbai, 3 cities in Goa, then to New Delhi, Old Delhi, Agra, Jaipur, and then back to Mumbai. You don't get a whole lot of time to see things. So it's just straight up research, and on the ground research is the best way to do it. I don't
Yeah.
get. I mean, we used to say sight, sound, smells of the battlefield. If I don't give, like some guys can write using Google Earth, and I just can't. I got to get on the ground
Sure.
and see what it looks like, see what it smells like, and it works out well for the books because there's a ton of stuff about India that I never would have. I'd have written it, and then they just said this is stupid. Anybody who'd been to India would say that. For instance, the Pike's always doing dismounted patrol or not dismounted surveillance on somebody. He's got somebody in his eyes and they're doing the whole box thing and they're surveilling him to do the takedown or whatever. He ain't doing that as a gringo in India. I mean, within 30 minutes, I was like, oh, I'm in trouble. Because there was nowhere I could go where it wasn't like a record scratch. As soon as I walked in a room, everybody looking at me. Whether you're doing anything wrong or not, if you're just me, I was like, there's no way he's going to be able to follow anybody because everybody's looking at him. Everybody was coming up to my wife saying, I want to take a selfie with you. Let me take a selfie.
Really?
Can I practice my English with you? Yeah, we got tons of pictures of people taking pictures of her.
Look at the white dude. Get the
Yeah,
picture of the white
absolutely.
dude.
And they're talking about Mumbai was this big, metropolitan city like New York. I'm like, really? Show me the one other gringo. Where is he? I mean, everywhere we went was just everybody. We go to the train station. I mean, as soon as you walk in, everybody's like, what's that guy doing here? And so I had to learn. I mean, I was like, okay, I got to figure that out. How's he going to do a mission here? Because that's just not going to work. And I wouldn't have known that if I went there. I'd have figured that, it'd be like New York City or something, but it most definitely wasn't.
No.
Other things I say there's like 50% that I'm looking for. I go with a list and I'm going to look at this stuff. And there's 50% that's looking for me that I don't even know exist. And so we got to Mumbai at the end of the book, into the gray zone. It's got a billionaire in there. Thakker's a billionaire who owns the largest residence in the world. And that place is real. I'm in Mumbai and they stop and point it out. It's 27 stories tall. It cost $3 billion to build. It's got helipads on the roof. It's got rooms that snow on you. It's got rooms with sacred cows. And it's for a family of 6.
That's cool. Wow.
27 stories tall. And I'm like, I saw it, took pictures of it, said, okay, that's making the book. But I never heard of that if I hadn't have been there. And so those kind of things are always jumping out at you.
All right, we're wrapping up this best of Q2, and I couldn't include everything, but this was another great moment. This might be the best moment from Q2. Keegan Gill wrote a book about surviving the fastest ever naval ejection. That's what this clip is about. Amazing story.
On January 15th, 2014, I showed up in the squadron on a day that was going to change my life forever. And you don't know it when those days are going to be. But when I showed up in the squadron, it was just like another day. Busy ready room. Pilots, we're constantly doing like 5 or 10 different jobs at once. We've got ground jobs and collateral duties. We're planning some sort of dining out. I'm like trying to get a bagpiper online for this event we're going to do. Like you're constantly just doing all sorts of other. Sure. I think people think, oh, you're a pilot. You get to focus on learning tactics all day and flying airplanes. But no, like you've got like a full-time ground job, and then you got the full-time job of being a fighter pilot and studying and keeping on top of that. But I showed up that morning in the squadron. My squadron mate Fisty was at the SDO desk standing duty. And to keep things light with a morbid sense of humor that we oftentimes, develop and utilize in that world, with the constant stress that's on us, he took a shark tracker app off his phone, and he put all these GPS tagged locations of sharks that were out in the working airspace that we were going to utilize that day out over the Atlantic, called the Whiskey 72. He put that up on the whiteboard behind the duty desk, and so he had all the airspace drawn out. And then he had all these little red marks of all these sharks. And they were no shit, like these are real GPS tagged sharks that were out there. And he was joking with me. He said, oh, today would be a terrible day to eject. There is below freezing air temps. There was a bit of wind, so the ocean was a bit churned up. The water temp was at 37 degrees Fahrenheit at the nearby buoy. And now there's this 16-foot, 3,500-pound great white shark named Mary Lee directly underneath my airspace. And so
this wasn't something he normally did. This was just
no,
by chance.
this was just on this day. It was like a funny thing he found and decided to do. I mean, he was like always doing funny stuff around the squadron, which was very helpful, for everybody. Everybody loved it. But that was not a normal part of our brief or anything. It just happened. And so after like maybe an hour after that conversation with Fisty, I was out over the Atlantic practicing dogfighting. And we got to our last set of fighting for the day. We had hit Joker fuel, meaning we had just enough fuel to knock out one last quick set of fighting. And so we set up for that last round of dogfight. So this is probably the epitome of what people think when they think fighter pilot. It's a couple aircraft or more within visual range trying to shoot each other down. In this case, it's training, but our training is mimicked as close as possible to the real thing. While we're not actually hosing off real missiles or shooting actual 20 Mike rounds at one another, we're still doing all the mechanics and we're still like validating these shots and everything to see like, no shit, like who won this fight or not. And it's very dynamic. You're flying the aircraft, talking on multiple radios. You're operating an attack radar, sensors, defensive systems. You're sort of this four-dimensional chess match that's happening very rapidly, all while you're under a lot of physical stress. You're pulling 7.5 Gs, and at that kind of G-force, now your body weighs 1,600 or more pounds. Just your head and helmet is like having 150 pounds on your head. So you're in the midst of a high-intensity interval training workout while you're doing this. You're squeezing your legs, your core, you're fighting to breathe, and so there's a lot going on.
Yeah.
And in this fight, we came to the merge where our paths cross, and I rolled my jet inverted, and I pulled my aircraft down at the ocean. Now, typically, this vertical maneuver would take about 5,000 feet of vertical airspace. I was at 10,500 feet when I started this maneuver. We have a 5,000-foot hard deck that's set for training purposes. So in case we do make a mistake, there's that 5,000 feet of extra room, almost a mile of space for screw-ups. So I maneuvered the aircraft, not fully realizing the airspeed that I had gotten up to, which was above standard for our setup and multiple reasons that kind of had cascaded into this decision. But I made a mistake, and I maneuvered the jet nose low at a very high airspeed. All would have still been okay, except as the aircraft accelerated and I was pointed basically straight at the ocean, I hit what's called the G bucket. And this was a point where the aircraft thought there were bombs on the wings that weren't actually there. And so it overrode my control input in an effort to protect itself from overstressing what it perceived as a bomb loadout. And this was kind of the worst case scenario. It'd be like going around a sharp corner in a sports car and then having your steering wheel kick back halfway. Only instead of skidding off the road, I'm now stuck in this dive at the ocean. And the way I perceived it was I was pulling that 7.5 Gs. I could feel that 1,600 pounds of force as I'm craning my neck up to keep sight of my adversary. I can feel that, and all of a sudden it just eased. And it was like the worst feeling in the pit of my stomach as I look down and I'm face down at the ocean is rushing up at me, and the aircraft is not responding to my command. And that's called out of control flight. When the aircraft does not respond to what you're telling it to do, now you're an OCF.
Was this something you did wrong, or was it a malfunction with the aircraft?
It was a combination. So there was multiple causal factors after the investigation, but one was we set up in a non-standard setup that ended up kind of creating a dangerous situation. Two, I maneuvered the aircraft nose low above Top Gun recommended airspeed. Three, I had this G limiter function kick in from the flight control computer software. And unfortunately, that function has killed many more senior aviators prior to me and caused mishaps. And I know a guy that it killed after my mishap. Most other Generation 4 fighters and all Generation 5 fighters, as far as I'm aware, they have a similar system, that protection system, so it won't overstress the aircraft, but that is linked to a ground proximity warning system. So that same system on the aircraft that can detect a pending collision can override that G limiting function. And even I think the F-22 if that thing is on a collision course, it'll actually override the pilot's control input, and it'll pull like 10 Gs to pull those guys out of a dive to save them. Unfortunately, the Super Hornet, for whatever reason, there's no communication between that ground proximity warning system and the flight control computer software. So it kind of it creates this dangerous situation that can be very insidious, and it just rapidly onsets at the worst possible moment. And like I said, unfortunately, it's killed several people and kind of exacerbated my situation. But all those things come together, and the ocean's rushing up at me. I hear the radar altimeter go off, letting me know I just went through the hard deck. And very quickly, the ocean's just rushing up, filling the canopy. And 2 seconds before impacting the ocean, traveling at 695 miles per hour, so nearly the speed of sound, I pulled the ejection handle. And just the sense of dread and the overwhelming ground rush, I knew there was no way I was going to be able to recover this aircraft. And in a last-ditch attempt to survive, I pulled the handle. A normal ejection is very violent. Even if you're straight and level below 180 knots airspeed, guys still get flail injuries where they damage their arms and shoulders. Guys still get their spine compressed because when you pull that handle, a rocket motor ignites and it boosts you out of there. And there's a 50 G instantaneous force that just like crushes your spine. And that eases to 12 to 14 Gs. So imagine yourself weighing 14 times what you weigh, sitting here on the ground, and it just crushes you. And then to make matters worse, I impact the airflow at that speed. So I basically impacted the sound barrier with my body. And it turns out the human body is not terribly aerodynamic at the speed of sound. But that just ripped my head off, traumatic brain injury, smashed my face to hell. I broke my C1 in my neck from my head whipping back. I broke my left scapula, my shoulder. My arms flailed so violently, it destroyed my left radius and ulna, severing the median nerve that controlled my left hand. My upper arm bones broke. The right humerus tore through my right brachial artery, causing internal bleeding. The gear on my vest all ripped off. The dry suit that I was wearing to protect me from that frigid ocean water all shredded open, leaving me exposed to the elements. My legs were flailing around so violently from that airflow that the steel-toe boots on my feet effectively came like wrecking balls, smashing open my lower legs. My tib fibs were fractured on both sides. Chunks of my bone were falling out of my shin. And this all just happens in an instant.
Do you pass out? Do you pass out as this all happens?
Yeah, the last linear memory I have is right as I just sensed that ocean rushing up and going, oh shit. And then my body just naturally took over. The training kicked in. I assumed that position and I was out. But from there, I have no linear memory, but I have in the form of flashbacks over the course of years. A lot of times, like night terrors in the middle of the night trying to sleep, would get back clips. But I've been able to recreate this story very accurately from all the investigation that went into it. The aircraft data recorder, the black box that they got recovered, gave me a lot of this information. And we've been able to really accurately reconstruct exactly what went down and why. But while I was in the water real time, I was pretty out of it in a large part from that head injury. But I do have clips of, the parachute that had just saved my life very quickly sunk underneath that ocean swell and started to pull me under, drowning me alive. And so I had a lot of clips of being in that situation, thinking, one, I'm bleeding out and there's a shark that's going to finish me off at any minute. And just that terrible sense of dread when you need a breath of air and you can't get it is a pretty awful sensation.
Did your team assume you were dead?
No, my flight lead, fortunately, he spotted my parachute opening. And so he was able to drop a GPS mark of my position, which was now very rapidly changing as I submerged into that ocean current and was being pulled along. But he very quickly coordinated an on-scene commander role and got the search and rescue effort underway. And so they had Coast Guard, they had multiple Navy helicopters en route. They had a fishing vessel that got over there to my position, a Coast Guard vessel that was en route. So there was a lot of effort coming. Whether I was dead or alive, they were gonna do their best to get me out of that ocean. And it took about 2 hours before a Navy H-60 showed up and was able to get me out with a rescue swimmer, and rushed to a level 1 trauma center in Norfolk, Virginia, where when I arrived there, I was, destroyed. I had coded several times on the flight. I was lucky to be alive. I was extremely hypothermic. When they took my core body temperature, I was at 87 degrees Fahrenheit. So near freezing, should have been dead from hypothermia, but they said, had my dry suit actually functioned properly, I would have bled to death way before anybody got there. So it ended up being a crazy twist of fate that kept me alive. But they had to pump the water out of my lungs. They had to treat me for rhabdo because my kidneys were so overwhelmed from all this tissue breakdown. My arms and legs were destroyed. I had multiple blood transfusions for all the blood that I had lost. And once I was semi-stable, they induced a coma and rushed me into surgery. And I spent the next week undergoing over a dozen trauma surgeries to salvage my extremities from amputation and to rebuild my skeleton. And after another week, they were trying to get me to come out of that coma, and it didn't look like I was going to come to. But after 2 full weeks in a comatose state, eventually the lights started coming back on. And I had no memory of what had happened. I didn't know where I was. Between the pain meds and the head injury, I was just very loopy. But eventually the medical staff came in and explained, hey, you've been in a high-speed ejection. You're likely never going to walk again. We don't think you'll ever be able to use your arms again, and your military flying career is over. And I remember I thought that somebody had tied me down on the bed with this blanket, where this blanket was made of lead or something, because I couldn't move, but it was because I was paralyzed. And it turns out if you want to make a fighter pilot do something, tell them it's impossible, because what the doctors had said was I couldn't do it. And so I just started working my ass off every day to send signals to my nervous system to get moving. And over the course of the next 3 months, undergoing all sorts of different therapies, getting loaded up on a massive amount of pharmaceuticals for the pain management side of things, I was at least able to get around on a walker and be discharged and continue as an outpatient. And I spent the next 2 years undergoing more surgeries, overcoming prescription drug addiction, and eventually getting all the medical waivers required and going through an investigation of the mishap. And I actually returned to the cockpit of the F-18 Super Hornet.
Yeah, which is incredible. I'm just wondering, because you're going over it very quickly, but it's a very long recovery process. I'm wondering, in the immediate, knowledge that of what at least they're telling you, you may never walk, you may never fly again, or you're going to struggle to walk and all that. What you do, as you said, with flying is extremely physical. And I would say, like, what you're able to do physically defines very much of who you are, your job, and even just your passion. So was there a feeling of like, because I would just imagine I don't even want to be here anymore, because we've had people on the show like Army Ranger Mike Schlitz, who's lost both of his arms in combat, severely burned the majority of his body, and now he's doing great. But he's written articles, I believe, for Ranger Up at one point saying that, yeah, there was a time he thought of suicide. And, we do know that veteran suicide and military suicide is a huge, huge issue. I would just imagine someone who lives their life on the edge like you do, hearing you can't do any of this anymore. It would almost feel like, why live? And I'm wondering if you experienced any of that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, as I kind of came to and started to realize what was going on, like my career's probably over. I'm going to be physically messed up the rest of my life. I just crashed an $89 million jet into the ocean. Like, is that going to have repercussions? Are they going to crush me and hang me out to dry? Like, there was an overwhelming amount of darkness that was just crushing me down into this dark little pit. And I didn't realize it at the time, but I made this conscious decision in that darkness where I could have bit off on all the things that were going on and be like, you're right. My life's over. I'm going to be paralyzed. I'm a piece of shit. Like, my life's over. And I would just want to kill myself. There was that option. And that was the overwhelming, like that was the fire that was just raging inside of me.
Sure.
But I also had this little tiny ember that was, what if I do get better? What if I get to come back into this hospital wearing my flight suit with my wings on my chest and be like, guess what? I'm back. And that was the little tiny ember that I decided to stoke. And I started to visualize myself back. Like, what's it going to feel like? And that little bit started to build and build. And that pushed me into my therapy sessions full hearted and just ready to charge. And I really turned a lot of my focus onto my physical rehabilitation and just like hitting it as hard as I could. Like, all I'm going to be able to do today is wiggle my pinky. But you know what? That's like, that's like a new PR for me at this point. So, that was a mindset thing that came out of this that I didn't realize was even happening at the time, but looking back at it now, like I realized that was a pivotal moment. I think so many other people face that same point on so many levels in life. Like we get into like a really bad situation. We have something overwhelming that's happening in our life. And there's this opportunity to feed that fire and just bite off on the darkness and the bitterness and like lead ourselves into some really bad shit. But in those moments, every moment of the day, it doesn't matter where you're at and what's happened in the past or where you think you're going, but you also get to make this conscious decision of like, what if I do something different? What if I go the other way? What if I have some optimism and hope, and then feed that fire? And before you know, that little ember is going to grow. And over time, those sort of energies shifted from that darkness and all this terrible shit that was raging to now the hope and energetic and the chance that I'm going to get back was raging. I was physically getting better, mentally getting better, performing again. Like I was able to max out the military physical fitness test again, the PRT.
Wow.
And so I was, those momentums built, but it took just constant effort, discipline, consistency of working towards that goal. It's not just you imagine it and then it happens. Every day and every moment I was working towards that. But that's what I was feeding. And that's what I think really led me to the recovery. And I think anybody can really apply to their life, whatever you're going through.
Yeah, I would imagine after you endure that, you're like, there's nothing worse you could endure. And I'm sure looking back, you're like, anything that you stressed over was nothing in comparison to this. I'm curious as well. You said when we were speaking about your journey joining the military that your parents weren't exactly thrilled you were doing this. When they saw you in the hospital, I mean, to me, this sounds like, other than you having to make the ultimate sacrifice, like this is their worst nightmare.
Oh yeah.
What was their feel like? What was their response to what had happened?
Yeah, I mean, it was heartbreaking for them. My mom especially was just torn apart. Like she was so worried because this was her little boy that she wanted to protect, and she had her apprehensions about me going in because she was fearful that something like this could happen. And when my family actually got the call from my commanding officer to say, "Hey, your son's been in a mishap," it was actually kind of a good thing that they misunderstood him because he had said, "Oh, he had fallen." I don't know, but they basically, my mom and dad kind of interpreted it as like I was like climbing up the ladder to get in the jet, and I like fell off and like I don't know, bonked my head on the concrete at the runway, So their whole trip to come see me, like that's what's in their mind. Like, oh, he's all right. He just fell off the airplane. Like that doofus. He's hit his head, growing up way harder than this probably. But when they showed up, like it all sunk in. Like, oh no, he ejected from a jet at the speed of sound. He is jacked up, and it was pretty hard on my parents, definitely.
I would imagine, man. So, how long was the process from hospital bed to back in the cockpit? And also, once you were flying again or about to fly, I would just imagine there had to be some overwhelming sense of fear that the last time you had done this is you had to go through what you went through.
Yeah, I mean, I had been working at that goal. It took me 2 years from my ejection date, almost exactly 2 years before I went back into train to fly in the F-18. Um, it was a long, difficult road, especially the prescription drug addiction stuff was a battle that a lot of other vets have to face. But that whole time, my goal was to get back into the cockpit, and so it was kind of like it was a little bit anxiety when I finally got the word of, hey, you're going to go back and fly, because it was like the day of. I was, at this point I was focused on my therapy, but during the day I was working like an office job at a computer. And the wing commodore comes in and he's like, "Hey, what are you doing today, Gil?" I was like, "Oh, just working on this." And he's like, "You want to go back and fly?" I was like, "Yeah." And I'm thinking like I'm going to have a few weeks to like at least get ready. And he's like, "All right, you're classing up today." And it's literally on the other side of the same hangar, and I go down and I kicked it back off again. right back into that, right back into the jet.
And that does it for the best of Q2. Be sure to subscribe wherever you're listening. Leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. And we will be back next week.
That's all for this episode of Battleline Podcast. But we're always posting new content on social media. Follow us on Instagram at Battleline Podcast and on Twitter at Battleline Pod. That's an order. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss any new episodes up every Tuesday. Leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or your podcast platform of choice. Believe in yourself. Face all challenges head on. And as always, never quit.